Hey man, it's me, Kevin Smith. Welcome to the Grow Tent, everybody. You have found the best growing channel on YouTube, man. The place where we simplify the approach for you so everyone can learn how to grow. We make it so simple, even I can understand. So I'm going to listen and learn right now.
Woo! What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Grow Tent. We got a fantastic episode for you today. We just got back from Tinley. I don't know if y'all saw that episode, but that's on our Snake and Python channel. Make sure you check it out. Spartan Python. You can find a link to it in the video description below. Now, I know everybody's favorite part are these intros, but hey, this is how we pay the bills. If you don't want to listen to it, because I basically say the same thing over and over again, it lasts about 3-ish minutes, you can just skip forward in the video if you don't want to listen to it. Guys, if you haven't joined our Patreon yet, we got the biggest Patreon there is when it comes to this stuff, and it's the best. All right? Follow along, jump on there. I don't care which one you do. You still get to see live plants because YouTube don't like me no more, I guess, and they yell at me every time I put them up. So check out the Patreon link. That's the video description below. My puppy is downstairs going crazy all of a sudden. She's like, oh, I think Dad's videotaping. Let's go start barking. So if you hear her, that's Bella in her pen. She's not happy with me because I put her in her pen so I could do this video. All right, guys, if you want to grow the same equipment with me, you can find it at welcometothegrowtent.com. Not to be confused with our new merch store that's going to be opening soon, which is going to be WTTGT.com. Guys, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, watch the full video. It helps out a ton. All right, I think we're flying through this one. We got a great intro going here. All right, here we go. After only 1 minute and 20 seconds, we're already in the video, so people are going to be fast forwarding way too far past it. All right, here we go. Let's go. Woo! What's happening, everybody? Man, I'm glad to be back. We took like a 5-day break from shooting videos. We did a live video yesterday, but we're back making videos. As always, guys, I get a lot of my video ideas from what you guys put in the comment section. So if you put it in there and it's a question I like, a lot of times I'll type it in my phone and text it to myself. And then I just scroll back through there to look through the videos, or look through those things and decide which videos I want to make. And once again, Bella's still barking, so if you hear her, just ignore her. She's mad at her dad because I've got her in her pen. All right, guys, so today we're going to be talking about PPMs and the amount to give or not give on different size plants, because I get a ton of questions and people are always asking me, hey, GT, I'm in week 1 of flower, how much do I feed? Hey, GT, I'm in week 2 of veg, how much should I feed? Hey, GT, I'm in week 6 of flower, how much should I feed? And the answer is, we're in a gray area again, just like, everything else. Like, how many plants do I need in a 4x4? If you want to know the answer to that question, go find one of our old videos. How many plants do I need for max yield, I think is the name of it. But once again, we're in gray areas, especially when it comes to feeding. What kind of substrate or media that you're growing in is going to affect this number, and the size of your plants is going to affect this number. How hot or not hot your soil was whenever you got it's going to affect this number. And then how big of a pot versus the size of your plant is also going to affect this number. So whenever people ask me this, it's not just I'm like, oh, you're in week 2, that's this number. Oh, you're such and such, that's this number. And they're like, well, that's what the feeding chart says. I don't fucking care what the feeding chart says. They don't know dick about your garden. They don't know how big your plant is. They don't know how big of a pot it's in. They don't know how hot the soil was whenever you put it in there. They don't know anything. That is a general guideline that says, hey, you got a perfectly healthy plant. This is what you give in this week. And it's not telling you to feed every week either. It's just saying if you happen to feed this week, this is what you give. It's not saying, oh, week 1 you feed this, week 2 you feed this, week 3 you feed this. That's not what it's telling you. It's just telling you if you happen to feed on this week, these are the ratios we want you to give. And that's if you have a perfectly healthy plant, which most people don't. Some people do, but most people don't. And if you give too many nutrients to a sick plant, the plant gets sicker. Just like if you turn up the lights on a sick or a shitty plant, it gets sicker and shittier. All right? This is all about learning what your plant needs when it needs it. And the easiest way to find that is to whenever you're starting out. I know everybody's just like, I want the max yield right away. Whenever you're starting out, you should be learning what the minimum amount it takes to get through the grow successfully, and then you can slowly sneak up on it. All right, what's the minimum amount I can use to give the plant what it needs without burning them? Because as soon as you start burning them, you burn the tips up, and then you burn down the edges of the leaves. That's when you're really feeding too hot, if it runs down the edges of the leaves. That's whenever it really starts messing up your plant, really hurting it, stunting it, and that sort of thing. Okay, so once again, this is not a one-size-fits-all answer. There is no just, oh, that's easy. On week 6 of flower, we give 1,000 ppms. It doesn't work like that. What if your plant was 6 foot tall, and like my mother plants, they're 6 foot tall, and I can't get my arms around half of them, and I'm 6'2", I'm a big guy, and I can't get my arms around half of them. Well, what if it's in week 6 flower? Am I giving it the same amount of nutrients that I would give a plant that is 3 foot tall and 3 foot around? Doesn't make any sense, does it? When you think about it like that, you're like, oh, yeah, that doesn't make any sense at all. I like to use an example of if me and Princess GT go to a buffet, or we go out to eat. I am way bigger than she is, but it's going to take a different amount of food, calories, ppms, to feed us both. Because I'm way bigger than her. I do lots of manual labor and picking stuff up. I need more ppm than she does for playing and running around and doing stuff like that. Now, I probably eat too much ppm. I'm an overfeeder. When it comes to, I've got too many newts when it comes to eating. So that is the kind of the same thing. And once you look at it like that, it makes it way, way easier to understand, like, oh yeah, those feeding charts, how would they possibly know how much ppm my plant would need? Because they can't see it. So what we're going to talk about today is mainly we're going to do this towards soil, but it will go into ppm. We'll have to make some adjustments for it at the end. And if you haven't done it, we're getting ready to start a cocoa grow, the very next grow, after we chop down all of our current stuff, which is currently making cherry atomic sledgehammer and sour grape rock candy, which are coming to the Patreon next month. All right, so the first thing you're going to need is, I get a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I don't know what the ppm is, I just pour it in there based on that. You need a decent ppm and pH pen. You don't ever see me recommend a ton of equipment, because I like to tell you whatever you got will work, and it will. But a ppm and pH pen, a quality one, you can find them at welcometothegrowtent.com. Same one I use. I've had the same one for, I don't know, years now. I haven't even changed the batteries on it. It still works great. But you need this piece of equipment, okay? You don't need RO machines. You don't need the newest, fanciest lights. You don't need the specialized tent. You don't need any of this stuff. But a piece of equipment, which is luckily one of the cheaper pieces of equipment, you can get a really nice ppm pH pen for like 50 to 70 bucks. It is absolutely necessary to have that piece of equipment. It's not a piece of equipment you want to do without this. Can you do it? Yeah, you can probably work your way through it, but it's way easier whenever you have it and have a quality one. Don't buy the cheap ones. They don't last very long. They break all the time. You're constantly having to calibrate them. Buy a decent one. I don't care which brand you get, whether you get from my site or whether you just get like Blue Labs. You want to spend a lot of money. You got a lot of money. I see you're like, oh yeah, check out my Blue Lab pen, GT. I'm like, yeah, I get it. You got lots of money. Beautiful ppm pen. I really like it. I get it. You don't have to rub it in my face. All right, so that's the only real piece of equipment we're going to need. The other thing I'm going to tell you is clean out your drip trays. I actually have 2 sets of drip trays that's going to make checking your runoff ppm easier, so you know when it's time to feed. I have 2 sets. I clean them out weekly. Yeah, sometimes every 2 weeks. But I clean them out weekly. We're going to say that for the video. And sometimes I'm lazy. I just don't do it all the time. Too many nudes. I want to go to bed. So what you're going to do is you make sure you clean that out. All you got to do is lift the plant. Even if it's still in a scrognet, you can still lift it up a little bit, slide the old tray out, slide the new clean tray in. Makes measuring your runoff ppm way more accurate than trying to read it in the old salt-covered stuff. And the other thing that people want to say is, well, do I pour it in from the top or from the bottom? Do you care if I top feed or bottom feed? I've done both. Either way works. I don't care which one you do. I think the bottom's got a really cool name. They call it butt chugging. But whether you're in fabric or plastic pots with the little holes, I was like, well, I don't think it'll suck up the nutrients I need if I bottom feed in a fabric pot. It works just fine. Trust me, I've done it. On my old 5x5 tent, I had no way to get to the back, and I just bottom fed everything, and it was always okay. So I don't care if you top feed or bottom feed, does not matter, whichever one you like more. All right. A lot of times I'll top feed my front plants and bottom feed my back plants just because I don't want it. My canopies are usually really dense and I don't like going through it, so I'll just feed the drip tray. Okay, so now you're like, well, GT, you told me all these things, that pot size matters, your soil matters, your plant size matters. How am I going to know how much to feed? Well, that's a great question. That's what GT's here, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So it might be a slightly longer video. I mean, we're already at 10 minutes, and we're at 9 minutes, 10 minutes, I don't know. And we're just getting ready to get started. But you need to know that other stuff so you could understand why the way we're going to do this. So we're always going to feed in a feed, water, 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 feed schedule. And actually, if you're growing in pre-amended soil like Fox Farms, like we do, we're actually just going to be doing water, 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 water. We're basically just going to be doing water until our PPMs drop low enough to trigger a feeding. So if you would like to grow and just never feed your plants, because I only feed mine 2 to 3 times their entire life, and it's usually between weeks 4 and week 6 of flower. So how are we going to know when it's time to feed? I don't feed my plants until the runoff PPM drops into the 800s. As soon as it drops into the 800s, I don't care if it's 890, 9. As soon as I see where I check the runoff PPM and it's into the 800s, I know the next feeding, that is going to trigger me into a feeding. Actually, I usually check it the week before whenever I'm watering. I'm like, oh, this is only at 1,000, or this is at 900 and something. I know the next week whenever I go to water, I'm going to feed them because I know it'll be in the 800s or even lower. So that's how I'll know when the next feeding is coming up, because I always check my runoff PPM every single time, make sure everything's eating the same, that kind of stuff. Because if it's not, and it's being a pain in the butt and it's getting build up, you know what we do with the weak around here. They go off the cliff because this is Sparta. And so we've got that. So anytime the PPMs drop into the 800, that's how I know when I'm going to feed. Now, you're like, well, how do you get away with only feeding every 2 to 3 times? I don't understand that. Because I transplant a lot. So every time you transplant, especially if you're using soil like Fox Farms, this is why I tell everybody to do it, because when you're starting out, it's one less thing you have to do, and the less things you have to do, the less things you can mess up. So if I'm in a solo cup with brand new dirt, I got 2 to 3 weeks. Every time you transplant, the soil has about 2 to 3 weeks worth of food before you need to start feeding. Well, that's about the time that you transplant every 3 weeks for me. So to go from solos to 1 gallons, I don't ever use the solos because I hate them. So usually I just go cube into 1 gallon. And if I go from cube to 1 gallon, it has about 4 to 5 weeks worth of food in it that you don't need to feed. So if I go from 1 gallons to 3 gallons, that's 3 to 4 weeks for the 1 gallon. Then I transplant into a 3 gallon. Guess what? All that food in there, that's like I just fed them, okay? Because all that soil is pre-amended. So we're using the Happy Frog for veg and the Ocean Forest for flower. So again, now I've got another 3 to 4 weeks where I don't have to feed them. All I am doing is giving these plants water. Now I use RO water. If you're using RO water or distilled water or any kind of store-bought bottled water, you're probably going to have to add CalMag into this, but that's a supplement, not a nutrient, so it doesn't count as a feeding. So anytime that we are, if you're just using your regular tap water and your 200 ppm, you don't even have to give the CalMag. You can just water, pH 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 water, and then every time you transplant, you're still feeding them. So you don't need to do anything. That's why you can have bottles of nutrients just sitting around on the shelves, and you don't ever go through them. Now, I grow 54 plants now, so I go through more nutrients now than I used to, but whenever I was just growing 6, it was the nutrients basically just sat on the shelf. And my water comes out here at 6.8 I don't know, in the summertime, the pH of the water is like 6.7, and then in the wintertime, for some reason, the pH of the water is like 5.8. I don't even ever use my pH up and down, because as long as I'm above 5 and below 7, I just give the water to them. I don't try to hit any specific number. As long as I'm in a range, I actually like it varying the range more. And so as long as it's doing that, I don't care. So my pH up and down, I have bottles that are like 4 years old. I don't even know if they work anymore, because I don't even have to adjust it. Another thing, whenever you are going to use pH up or down, it goes in last. Last. You don't pH your water, then put nutrients and stuff in it, because that changes the pH, and then you have to pH up and down again at the end. So that goes in last. Just a little quick tip. All right. So you're like, all right, we've talked about all kinds of stuff, but you haven't told me the PPMs I need. Yeah, because you have to understand, the differences. So if you have a plant and you're like, well, how do I know what's too much? I'll tell you what, since I don't ever feed in veg, because the plant is always getting transplanted, so we don't even have to worry about feeding in veg. Unless you're talking about cocoa, then we're going to talk about that at the end. So hold your horses, I'll get there. I know I'm not doing it quick. I don't ever do it quick. And sorry. And so a PPM ranges is what we're going to talk about that are okay for your plant. All right. So if we're never feeding in veg, that means we're waiting till flower. We're always going to transplant into a bigger pot day one of flower. So we know we don't have to feed for about 2 to 3 weeks. You're like, well, wait a minute, GT. You said 3 to 4 weeks. That's because the plants, every time we transplant, that's because the plants were smaller when they were in veg. Now that the plants are bigger, and especially since we're flipping them to flower, they're going to go through the stretch. Their nutrient demands go up. So that's why whenever we transplant in veg, if you've got our transplant in veg, it lasts three-ish weeks, and maybe 4. And then when we go to flower, you have a bigger plant that also the nutrient demands go up. So they last 2-ish, 3-ish weeks, depending on your plant size. A lot of times with new people, they don't have to feed until week 4. And they're like, okay, well, now it's week 4. I've been doing what you said. Everything's looking good. My PPM's just dropped into the 800s. What do I do now? And now we are going to look at our nutrient guidelines or our nutrient schedule. You're like, yeah, you said that didn't matter. I know. I said we're going to fucking look at it. God dang it. Pay attention. I didn't say we were following everything. But what we're going to do is we are going to adjust. We're going to keep their ratios is what we're going to do. So if it says 1 of grow, or let's say it says 2 of grow and 4 of micro and 6 of bloom, okay? And we're dealing with a small plant. It just didn't go our way this run. We've got a small plant, but it's time to feed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep that ratio the same, the 2, the 4, and the 6. I'll keep that ratio in the same. But if I'm dealing with small plants, autos, anything like that, I will cut those ratios in half. So I will take and I'll be like, well, instead of 2, I'm going to give 1. Instead of 4, I'm going to give 2. Instead of 6, I'm going to give 3. And I'll just cut it right in 50%. I'll cut it right in half. And you're like, well, how am I going to get my plants to explode? You don't get them to explode by giving them more than they need. That hurts them. It does not help them. And remember, we are trying to figure out what the minimum we need is, so then we can crawl up on it. If you give them too much, you don't ever know, because you already fucked it up. So we're going to cut those ratios in half. And then you're going to check the PPM to see what it is and be like, okay, by cutting the ratios to 50% at week 4 flower, which they suggested with their ratios, we know, okay, this is 400 ppm is what we're going to feed these plants. And you are going to take notes. So you can remember, because I know you think, oh, I'll remember it. You're not going to fucking remember by the time you get done with seedling and veg and back into flower months down the road. Write it down so you can flip back and be like, all right, when I had plants this size last time and I gave them 400, everything looked good. And so now I might try and bump it up a little bit. Hopefully your plants look a little bit better. Or, oh man, that really burned the shit out of my autos I had last time. Because fuck autos. So this time, instead of doing, 50%, I might try 40%. And then write it the fuck down. Your notes are your Bible. That is how you tell what worked last time, and you can use that this time to help you on your next grow. Or you're like, man, I know GT said to week 4 flower, but it started to, the plant started to lighten up again. That means I'll feed a week earlier, and you'll know that because you wrote it down in your grow journal. Okay, for me, I use the big wall, big desk calendars because I got tons of space to write in them, and then I can just flip back month to month, and then I can see what week they are. Everything I write down on those big desk calendars. They are extremely helpful. I have one per tent. Well, not anymore, but I used to. But now I do it all on one. But you need to have one per tent because it'll make your life easier to keep track of everything. You're like, GT, but I want to know what max amount of PPMs I can give them. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's an answer that can't be given. I can tell you what I give to my plants, but it annoys me whenever I do that because then everybody's like, well, GT said that's what he gives his plants. That's what I'm going to give mine. My plants are gigantic, okay? If you give a smaller plant more nutrients than it needs, it hurts it. Okay, guys? Stop thinking that the more of something you give, the better results you get. It's not that way. It's you give it the correct amount. That is how you get the bigger yields. And you won't know the correct amount for you until you give it the bare minimum and sneak up on it. And then one time you're like, oh, that was a little bit too much. Let's back it down the next grow. Now we know where we are. And the thing that's really going to mess with you as you keep getting better, that amount that you can give is going to keep increasing. But you won't know that if you give them too much and you burn the shit out of them. I know it's not the answer everybody wants. Everybody wants the answer of, well, how do I give these plants that I'm growing right now the max amount I can give them without burning them? It is an impossible question to answer. And if you listen to the whole first half of this video, you would now you understand why. It's not a possible question. Can you maybe get away with giving them more than 400? Yeah, of course. They'll probably be okay. But how will you know? And your goal is to become proficient at this as fast as possible. I know, that was my goal too. But don't skip the steps. I'm telling you, you'll be a better gardener in the end because you didn't. I know it takes a couple grows longer than you want. I know, trust me. I want the max amount right now. Fuck you, GT. I'm telling you, do it this way. You'll become a better gardener way faster by doing it this way because the plants will respond because you're not hurting them with too many newts. All right. So that's my video for today. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. I'll see you guys next time. GT out.